30 years plus of experience, and we are so fortunate that she has been able to join the OFA team. And she's got a fantastic training. I tell you, you're going to walk away feeling more confident in your grant writing and be able to support your efforts in attaining a federal grant. So I'm going to kick it over to Sandy. Sandy.
Well, thank you, Kristen, and hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and to offer some tips and some knowledge that I've gained. I'm always happy to share information about grant writing. So our objectives today are we're going to review a common grant application and understand the sections that are common in most grant applications. You'll learn some tips for writing strong applications, grant applications, and then we're going to give you some information about other grant writing resources as well. So whenever I think about a grant project or a program, I think about the steps. There's a saying about a long journey starts with a single step. So we're going to go over some of the steps that most people take when they think about a grant application. So the first one is make a plan, and then you make the deal. You gather information, you hunt for grant opportunities. I always think that you can, if you divide and conquer a big project into little steps, it looks a little less daunting, one step at a time. And then we'll talk a little bit about what you do after you submit. So making a plan. So when you first identify a need or an opportunity, then you want to assess it and see if it fits with your agency's mission and strategic plan. And then you think about your agency's expertise, their resources and strengths to approach the project. You plan things before you write. There's a great story about Agatha Christie, the mystery writer. She was in her garden one time and she said to a friend, "Oh, I just thought of the ending of my book." And the friend said, "Oh, Agatha, I'd love to read your next book." And she said, "Oh, I haven't written it yet. It's all in my head." So when you start making a plan, at first it's going to be in your head and you want to think it through from the beginning to the end. So once you have an idea of what you want to ask for, I encourage you to start by talking to people that you work for, people that you're going to partner with potentially, or who actually will be the staff who will work on a grant, and people who might already be doing the same thing. Look for opportunities to collaborate. Collaboration is very much emphasized in grant applications these days. And get everybody's buy-in. You have to kind of sell your idea both internally within your organization as well as externally to funders and to grantors. So when you think of a grant, it's really a collection of paragraphs and information. So a lot of the information that are things that you already have. The first two steps that I want to really emphasize, even if you think you're never going to apply for a grant application this year, go ahead and register on sam.gov for an account and get your UEI number, because that takes several weeks and you want to be prepared. It's free to do this. Then you'll have to renew your registration every year. But if you can start with those two steps, you will be that much more grant ready. And that's what we're trying to do today, is get you grant ready. Then look around your agency and look at things like your mission statement, any planning documents you have. Just gather things, pictures of clients, pictures of events that you've had, information that describes your agency that might be already on your website. All of these things will help you find the paragraphs you're going to need to write a common grant application. So where do you find a grant opportunity? Well, we hope you will know that, and remember the Nevada Governor's Office of Federal Assistance. That's why we're here, is to help you find federal grant opportunities and apply for federal grants. So if you're interested in federal grants, please remember us and remember our website. Also, we have this new tool called the U.S. Digital Response Grant Identification Tool, and this helps you search for grant opportunities. Grants.gov is where all federal opportunities are posted. And the search tool, the USDR grant identification tool, the great thing about it lets you save the search filters you use when you search for a grant opportunity. And it also helps you connect with potential partners and see who else might be interested in working on a grant or applying for a grant that you're interested in. So it's a way to build partnerships and collaborations. So it's just a little bit better tool than the grants.gov because grants.gov won't let you save your searches. Foundation grants, which are other kind of grants that people apply for, you can find them on the Foundation Center online directory. And there are also computers at different libraries that have a free subscription for this directory. So search on the link that we give you below to find the collaborating libraries. And if you can afford a subscription yourself at your agency, I encourage you to do that if you're interested in foundation grants. So once you find an opportunity, what are some of the things that you ask yourself and you ask the funder? What you look in the grant application guidelines for what their funding priorities are, and you think about whether or not your funding fits in there. And this is your opportunity to be a little bit of a devil's advocate. You want to think about, how am I going to persuade people that my idea fits in it? And does my idea really fit? So you have to kind of, think about what you're trying to do and assess whether it's really a good match with the funding opportunity. So I'm not going to read as we go through today all of the questions on the slides because I want to try to get through, and I do have a lot of content. But just know that there's a slide that gives you some suggestions for what questions to ask, and you'll all be getting a copy of the slides. Also, don't be afraid to contact grant agencies. Usually in the notice of funding opportunity for federal grants, they give you a contact person or a couple of people that you can contact for questions. Sometimes they'll let you present your project to them when you call. Sometimes they don't want to make comments on them and tell you whether they think it's a good idea or not, but it's your chance to ask questions of them, and also to sometimes they are open to hearing your ideas, but if they my number one grant writing rule is to never frustrate or anger anyone who has the opportunity to give you grant funds. So you want to make things as clear as possible, and you want to be respectful of the people that you ask questions of. And if they give you limits, you have to accept those limits. So now we're getting to the common grant application. So the way that common grant applications started is years ago, the foundations in a state would get together and they would create a common template that agencies throughout the state could use to submit grant applications to them. Nevada has never done something like that. And so we at OFA want to kind of take the lead to creating our Nevada Common Grant application. And one of the ones that I've liked in the past and that I've used myself is the Colorado Common Grant application. So we've provided a link for you, and we'll also give you a PDF of the actual application. So we're going to go through the sections. So these are some of the most common sections in a grant. There's the abstract summary, the background, a description of your organization, the needs statement, a description of your program or project idea, and what you're applying to do, your goals and objectives and activities, your scope of work, collaboration partners, evaluation, and budget. So I propose and I think that the most important sections to start with are the scope of work and the budget. And those two documents really are the skeleton of the grant application. If you have a person that you hire to work on the grant, and I would say to them, here is the scope of work and the budget for the grant. And the rest of the narrative and information in a grant application just supports those two documents. So I always say start with the budget and start with the scope of work. And those should be tied together so that when a person looks at them, they can see the expenses that you're wanting to fund and they see the activities that you're going to do in the grant. So now we're just going to talk about each section in order, but do remember that I suggest you start with a scope of work and a budget. So an abstract or summary is a really a summary of your grant application, and you usually most grant writers write this section last because you probably don't have this information until you've written the other parts of the grant. It kind of includes the name of the project, the name of your organization, where what you're going to do, what funds you're requested, and who's going to be involved in the grant. And it's basically a one-page summary. Sometimes there's um, page limits or character limits of how much information they want you to provide. As we're going through this common grant application, know that once you find a federal grant opportunity or other grant opportunity, follow their instructions of how they want the information and make sure you follow it to the letter. But the common grant application, if you will go ahead and complete a common grant application, you will be much more grant ready when an opportunity comes along. So the second section is the background, and this is where you describe your organization and the current programs that you serve. You talk about inclusiveness and diversity. It's a really hot topic in our environment today. Your planning and how your project fits with your planning, a little bit about your board and a little bit about volunteers, and probably a little bit about staff. So as much information as you can fit within page limits of what your organization looks like. Then you come to the needs statement, and basically a grant is a persuasive tool to get funding. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to show the funder why the funds are needed and how you're capable and the best one to do the project that's gonna improve the need. So say the need is uh, like people in the community that you work in have a high rate of food insecurity and you're working for a food bank. So you would give statistics and information to describe the need in the community and how, how many people are in danger of food insecurity or experiencing food insecurity. So this is where you want to defend and justify your request. Try to get information from external sources like the census or research studies, all that kind of information that's not just you saying, we know the community and we know what's needed. Try to give as much data and objective information from outside your agency of what is the need in the area that you're serving. The next section is the program and project description. So this is where you describe what you want to do. And you write a couple, you gather paragraphs or you write a paragraph from the planning that you've done, describe your project. How does it address and solve the problem? Why is your organization the best choice to receive this funding? Who will you serve? How will you do it? When will you do it and where? How many people will you be able to serve? How much will it cost? And what will happen if you receive less money than you requested, which is sometimes a common problem that you have. So when I first started designing a project, I always think in terms of the Mercedes budget versus the Volkswagen budget. So if I can get the Mercedes budget, that'd be great. But then I think, well, if I could get less money, what could I do? Could I still do the project with less money, or how would I do it? And that's my Volkswagen budget. So then you get to objectives. So there's basically two kinds of objectives. There's process objectives and outcome objectives. Process of objectives are the things that the steps and the activities that you're going to do. And then outcome objectives are the result that you want to achieve. So one of the big popular ways to write objectives nowadays is called the SMART acronym. And SMART stands for writing objectives that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound or timely. So while you're writing the objective, I've given you a couple of examples. So by year 2 of the project, which is, specific, the LEA staff, which is specific, will have trained 75% of health education teachers, so that's measurable, in the school district on the selected scientifically based health education curriculum. So that phrase is achievable, relevant, and then the first part of the objective by year 2 of the project is the time bound. So then you get to the scope of work, which I said, if you'll remember, is one of the most important sections of the grant. So this describes what you're going to do more in detail, and it shows who's going to do it and the time frame and the activities that you're going to conduct that will help you meet the objective. So this is a sample of a scope of work. Scope of works are also sometimes called work plans. There's also a Gantt chart that is popular in social work and research. They use Gantt charts a lot. When you apply for a federal grant, they'll often tell you what kind of work plan they want. If they don't give you an idea, here's a sample that I've used in the past that I find is really helpful. So you restate the objective in this table, and then you list the steps that you're going to do in order to reach that objective. This is where I think in the publicity about this training today, they had a quote from me where I said that if you can plan a vacation or you can write a term paper in high school, you can write a grant. And the reason I say that is that a grant answers the same kind of questions and decision-making process that you use to go on a vacation. So let me go back up, I'm sorry. When you write a grant, when you go on a vacation, you always think in terms of who, what, when, where, why, and how. And I started as a journalist, and those are the questions that a journalist asks when they write an article, when they interview someone for an article in the newspaper. Um, so this chart shows who's going to do what, which are the activities. You've talked in the narrative already about why you're going to do it in the needs section. This talks about how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, and where you're going to do it. So you think about those questions. And when you decide to to go on a vacation, you're probably sitting around in your home or your office and you're saying, I'm tired. I haven't been on a vacation in a long time. Summer's coming up. This would be a good time to go on a vacation. So that's your why. That's your need. Then you decide, where am I going to go? Who am I going to take with me? How much am I going to spend? What will we do on vacation? You ask yourselves all those questions. So if you will remember those questions and ask yourself those as you're deciding about your grant program or project, it will help you see the steps that you need to take in order to conduct the grant. And this is very clear to reviewers. It helps the reviewers understand your project. So I really encourage, even if a grant doesn't ask for a scope of work, I think this is a good activity for you to fill out a scope of work, because it'll help you share your idea and project with the people who, like your supervisors, your board, and also the staff that you're going to hire if you have, or the staff who will be involved in conducting the grant. Then the next section in a common grant application is to describe any partners or collaborators that will be involved in the program and project. And you want to get letters of support or letters of commitment from your partners if you can. The difference in a letter of support versus a letter of commitment is a letter of support just says, we know about their project and this is a great organization and we really support the project, and we encourage you to fund them. A letter of commitment from your partner says, we're going to participate on the project with you, and here is how we're going to participate. And here is a value of our participation, either an in-kind value or a cash value. They might contribute money towards your project. They also might be paid from the grant. They could be a contractor under the grant or receive a sub-grant. So you could get a letter of commitment saying, we agree to participate as a consultant or a contractor or a sub-grantee of your project. So that's kind of what you talk about in this section. Who are your partners going to be? Describe your partners, and then try to get letters of support and letters of commitment. The next section of a common grant application is how you're going to evaluate what you achieve. And just as there are two types of objectives, process objectives and outcome objectives, there's two types of evaluation, process and outcome. So a process evaluation is where you look at your intention of what activities you're going to conduct and how you're going to spend the funds. And that you ask the question, did you conduct the project in the way that you said you would and spend the budget in the ways that you said you would? An outcome evaluation evaluates the results of your grant. So if you're doing this project in order to improve things or enhance things or build on things you've already done, so did you achieve the results? Are things better for your community? How can you show that they are better? Did you do pre and post surveys? Did you collect some data that back up that the work that you've done has resulted in an improvement? And how can you prove it's because of what you did? You can conduct evaluations in-house with your existing staff or volunteers. Someone could be in charge of conducting the evaluation. You can also hire or contract with and pay for evaluation out of your grant. And these are called external evaluators. And ways to find them are to look at universities and colleges or think tanks. Professors are often willing to serve as an external evaluator. If you're going to apply for a federal grant and you want to hire an external evaluator, the rule of thumb is that 10% of your grant is usually the fee that an evaluator charges in order to conduct the evaluation. The next section of the grant is a budget. So again, whenever you apply for a grant, they might have a form and a format that they want you to use to develop your grant budget. And this is the first chart here is called the line item budget. And this is where you write down the different costs that you're looking for funding for, as well as an in-kind match or where you're going to get a cash match from. And so you kind of summarize the budget for your project. I like this table because I like to include this calculation method to show the math, to show how I arrived at the cost. It kind of backs up and gives you credibility For your evaluators, it shows that you've really thought it through. And again, it's, if you do the budget and tie it to the activities that you're going to do in the scope of work, this is a really clear picture of what you're trying to achieve with the grant funds. The next section is, oh, sorry about that. A lot of funders ask you to provide a budget narrative. And a budget narrative is really how you justify your cost and why the cost is needed. So I've given you a couple of examples of how to write a budget narrative. Just remember, a lot of times people use a budget narrative to just show more detail of how they arrived at the cost, but try to remember that you're trying to prove why the expense is needed. So you want to justify this expense in the narrative, not only provide detail, but provide information about why you need this expense. So those are the sections of a grant. So if you can collect those sections through paragraphs that you've already written or information that you already have, you're going to be a step ahead and a little more grant ready for when you finally find an opportunity. So I just have some statistics that I wanted to share. Um, a lot of times in federal grant applications, there's a little paragraph that gives you a sense of the reporting burden. Their agencies are required to estimate what they think the time you're going to spend in order to prepare the grant application. Right now, I'm helping the Nevada Department of Education with a grant application. And the application actually says that we can prepare this grant in 16 hours. And that's a little unreasonable to me. It has taken us much more than 16 hours to work on this grant. Sometimes they'll estimate, a larger number of hours, and I think, well, that's a little bit high. But the statistics that have a source called The Balance has found is that on average, a grant takes you from 80 to 200 hours. What I find is writing a foundation grant takes me about maybe a week when I'm working full time and I'm working on several other projects at the same time. And then if I'm writing a federal grant application, I really need about a month of time to put it all together. What I found after 30 years of grant writing, it's not actually the grant writing that takes most of the time. It's really the grant planning and the selling of the idea internally within the agency, getting the partners externally, and making that deal. Um, I think people spend a lot of time on that, and I think that takes the most time. And then once you have your budget and your scope of work, writing those other sections becomes much easier because you're clear in your head about what you're trying to do, and you just need to gather information that supports all those other sections, just support the scope of work and the budget. So I just gathered some statistics from the web. If you hire a grant writer or you have a grant writer who's writing new and existing grants, then they should have a success rate of 50 to 60%. The highest success rate I've ever had is about 60% when I worked for tribes. And that was really because of the need, that we had a strong need. There was high poverty, there was high just high need in the community, and we could prove it. And so getting grants were a lot easier. Um, Yet sometimes you'll hear from grant writers that they have 100% success rate. I would be very suspicious of that. Either they're only applying for grants they know they're going to get, or they're exaggerating their success rate. I just haven't met very many people who have who truly have 100% success rate. When you're writing new grants, it's usually a 30 to 40% success rate, and existing grants, it's a little higher of about 80% rate. So now we just have some tips that I've gathered over, 30 years. My number one grant writing rule, again, don't frustrate the people who review your grant and make it easy to read. I try to write at the 8th grade level. I'll just give you a quick story. When I worked for the Washoe tribe, we hired a very talented planner, um, and he knew how to do huge, complex projects on the tribal land. And he would explain it to us and in big words. And so we wrote this grant using all of his big words that were special to his field. And then we went down, we got the grant and we were invited to come and explain it and meet the people at the EPA in the San Francisco Federal Office Building. So the day of the meeting, our planner couldn't come with us. So my supervisor and I went to the meeting, and the EPA staff came in and they said, "We're so excited about your idea, but we have a few questions. Can we ask you a few questions about your application?" And we weren't the subject matter experts. So when they asked these questions, we couldn't explain to them what they meant. And that's where I learned that if I didn't understand a grant that I was writing for a research study that studied ants, for example, that the typical reviewer wasn't going to understand them either. So I've learned to make my grant writing simple and clear and something that an 8th grader could understand. And I've had a lot more success that way. And I've been a federal grant reviewer, and believe me, it is so much easier when people write at a like a high school or middle school level. Follow the application instructions exactly. There's no shortcut to reading. As you learn to write grants and you write more and more grants and read grant applications and grant instructions, you do learn the ability um, to kind of scan things, because most federal grant opportunities are written in the same way. So you do, even though there's no shortcut to reading, I do have good ability to scan through things, and I know that you will too, the more you do it. Most people also speak more clearly than they write. So if this is true for you, try recording your thoughts on your cell phone or on a recorder and then writing them down. I think that's really helpful. I've actually started recording meetings on Teams when I meet with people to talk about a grant, because then you get a written transcript after the meeting and you can use that to help your grant writing. Use headings and bullets. I often think that as I'm writing a grant, I'm saying to the grant reviewer, here is where you should see my answer. This was the question you asked, here is my answer. So really be thoughtful and making the points that you want the reviewer to get, and use a lot of white space. I've seen some grants that use a lot of pictures and charts. A picture can tell 1,000 words. Good grant writing is not the most important thing. The writing isn't. It's having a good plan, a trustworthy and capable organization, and qualified people. So the more you can provide information that you have all of this, the better your chances of getting a grant award are. As you're writing a grant, do your best to submit the grant a few days before the due date. Don't submit the day that it's due. Why bring that stress on yourself? And then practice what works for you. I love bubble baths. So as I'm writing a grant, I will go home and take a relaxing bubble bath. Then if you're not funded, don't give up. Keep trying. Ask for reviewer comments and ask the grant contact people that you applied to whether it would be worth submitting another proposal. and listen to the reviewer comments and take heed and just be open to receiving constructive criticism. I think I learned to kind of divorce my ego and about my writing and about my ideas, because I can really learn from, failure to get a grant, if failure, any kind of failure in life, is just really an opportunity to learn for the future. So there is another course that's free on how to do introduction grant writing, and it's called the Introduction to Proposal Writing. And we've given you the link to that, and it's a free online course. Also, once you find federal agencies that you think have grants that you want to apply for, many of the federal agencies have given on their websites some information about how to write their grants. And also, they have recorded some webinars on grant opportunities. So even if it's not a current grant opportunity, if you can watch those webinars, the federal agencies will guide you through what they want to see in their grant applications. Universities and colleges also offer grant writing courses. Usually there's a cost. I know that UNLV and UNR have a grant writing course. Often they're through their continuing education offices, so you can look for them. Sometimes they offer certificate programs in grant writing and grant management. And there's quite a few books on grant writing. There's actually a Grant Writing for Dummies book that is pretty good. So I encourage you to look like on Amazon or in your bookstore for books on grant writing. There's also a lot of books in libraries that you can check out on grant writing. So thank you very much. I got through that a little bit faster than I thought I would, and we have some time for questions, and I'll turn it back over to Kristen.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. That was wonderful. So just kind of some quick, don't forget, remember that the Office of Federal Assistance, which is us, we are the single point of contact and the intergovernmental review. So if you've ever been filling out your federal grant applications and they say to, contact your single point of contact, that is us. So we have the link on our website for you to input when you are submitting for your federal grant application, if that's required. State agencies, if we have some state agency folks on this call, you are to report to us regardless if it's a federal grant or a non-federal grant. You are to notify the Office of Federal Assistance of your grant application, your intent to apply, when you receive a grant, and when you close out a grant. All right, and then let's see, next slide, what do we got? Let's see. Oh, and then some of the services that we offer, again, Sandy talked about it. We have our notice of funding opportunity and our database, so please check that out. And then remember, the Office of Federal Assistance is to help you in your federal grant journey. And one of the things that we are able to do is to provide free technical assistance. And that includes having some grant writing mentoring. We have, Sandy, I think she did a fantastic job explaining the common grant application and really gearing you up on your success in grant writing and applying for those federal grants. But we're here. So if you have questions regarding SAM.gov or 2CFR or any of those things, please reach out to us. And then, yes, and we also are continuing our free monthly trainings that we are offering. This is what today is. So, and then one way to make sure you're up to date on all things OFA is please sign up for our newsletters so you don't miss out on anything.